The Center for Christian Virtue was pushing for this bill and for the veto override. Last week, I talked with its president, Aaron Baer, about that. And because of the group's influence, there was a lot to discuss. I asked Baer about other issues and legislation his group wants to pursue.
You know, the fact that right now 43% of children in Ohio aren't born into a house where their mother and father are married and committed to each other, that's a systematic crisis. We want to see more children be born into a household where they can experience the blessing of knowing their biological mother and father. Again, state government has very little, you know, we can't be mandating those things and things like that, but we want to look at Ohio public policy to see how are we incentivizing marriage, how are we incentivizing family formation to see more children get to have that opportunity. Because every child, everybody knows they have that tie, that pull towards mom and dad. But also too, we see that you look at most of the places where we end up having to spend money as a state. You know, I always say that there's three things that we spend money on. We educate, we incarcerate, and we medicate. All of those things become more expensive when children are born into a household where they don't know their mother and father. And so we want to do as much as we can to encourage that.
You had a big win, as you just mentioned, with universal vouchers in the 2023 state budget. The response from parents who wanted state assistance to send their kids to private school has been overwhelming, as many might expect. How is this sustainable over time, and will that come to at a cost to public schools where most kids go?
So the bottom line on this is we should have an education system that's focused on what's best for the child, not what's best for any system or institution or anybody else in particular, right? This is trying to have a child-centric education system in Ohio. So if the public education system, if the government-run education system wants to be keeping kids in their schools, they should be providing a better service. They should be meeting parents' needs, meeting children's need at a better basis. It's wrong to say that these schools are unable to do that right now. If families were so happy with what they were getting in the public schools, you wouldn't see 72,000 more children be opting out to find a better educational outcome for them. So what we see, and what actually the studies, there was a great study out of the University of Arkansas that showed that actually school choice improves public schools outcomes, actually improves the academics in those school settings, because at the end of the day, when you compete and you have to provide a better service, it drives excellence, and that's what we really want to see across the board in education in Ohio.
When it comes to charter schools, though, they have not done as well.
Yeah, and again, this is one of these things that the more options, the more availability, the better off it'll be, right? And there's some charter schools that are doing great, and there's some charter schools that are doing so great, just like there's some public schools that are doing great, there's some private schools that are doing great, and some schools that aren't. So when we have more options and we make the parent the driver of it, we're going to see a better system. Again, there's no such thing as a perfect system. We're never going to be in a place where every child is going to be literate, but we can do so much better than we're doing right now, and there's some really easy things we can do to get there.
One of those easy things may be universal preschool. That's something that people have talked about as setting kids on the right path. Would you support that?
By all means, it's something we'll look at. But at the end of the day, what we want to see first and foremost is parents have options. That's the thing that we think is the lowest hanging fruit to empower every family to go where they need to go. Making things like preschool available to families, that's great. But actually, a lot of the data shows that some of that time being with mom and dad is actually important as well. So you know, the universal preschool conversation is one we're certainly interested in. We're going to look at, but it's one of these things that a lot of times the claims around it are maybe a little overstated.
You also had two big losses in 2023 with issues 1 and 1, August and November.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Let's talk first about the August issue 1, which was the requirement of 60% voter approval to change the Constitution. That had been pushed as a way to protect the Constitution. Since it failed, do you still want to see that threshold raised to 60% to protect the Constitution?
You know, by all means, that's just good public policy to have a higher level to raise the threshold. I think at this point, you know, that's going to be a really hard issue to bring back to the voters. It went down pretty decisively, and so it's going to be a difficult one to address. But I do think a lot of folks that maybe either sat on the sideline on that or maybe even opposed it, I think 5-10 years from now are going to really regret that, because you're already seeing it's open season on the Ohio Constitution right now. You have way more constitutional amendments being brought forward than there was before the 60% went down. Things like minimum wage, things like...
We've had had some years where we've had multiple constitutional
multiples,
amendments.
but there's so many right now that are being brought forward, and I think what you're going to end up seeing is was designed as a republic is going to become a direct democracy, and we're going to have our Constitution loaded up with even more bad ideas. So that is something we're very much concerned about, but I think that the idea of going back to the voters anytime soon on that's not a top priority for us right now.
And certainly with an amendment to guarantee abortion access and reproductive rights,
yeah, exactly. Our biggest priority there would be to get that out of the state constitution. Again, obviously,
raising to 60% would make it harder.
Make it a whole lot harder. But also, too, again, there was a pretty wide margin that we lost on the November issue by, right? We have to be really sober-minded about that. So understanding what it is, why we lost, and how we could go back and either get this completely out of the state constitution or moderate it some. Our priority is how do we save as many lives as possible. Right now, our estimates are this could cause upwards of 30,000 children to lose their lives every year if this stays in the Constitution. So we're concerned about that.
So is the plan to try to bring an amendment to the Constitution to, say, bring back the ban on abortion after 6 weeks or anything like that forward?
Honestly, Karen, in all sincerity, we're looking at this, but we're not going to come back until we see a really clear path to win, to be able to win at the ballots, do something like that. And it's one of these things that is going to take a lot of research and a lot of energy to figure out what that would look like.
Do these losses diminish your influence? Do they indicate that most Ohioans don't share your opinion on, say, abortion access and reproductive rights?
I don't. Again, I'll let other people prognosticate about that. I think by all means, our influence comes from our ability to move people. And if you look at things like the SAFE Act and Save Women's Sports Bill, that's one where, even a Baldwin-Wallace poll showed anywhere from 60 to 70% of people agree with us, right? And Baldwin-Wallace tends to not exactly poll favorably to us a lot of times. So it all depends issue by issue. Things like school choice poll really well. We've always known the abortion issue is one that on the general population is hard to win on a straight up vote on it. Now, on the other hand, you've got to look at this, and this is one of these things that, I think a lot of the prognostication over the November election was maybe over the top, because we have to square the reality that Mike DeWine ran on signing the heartbeat bill in 2018, signed it, and won 85 out of 88 counties in 2022. J.D. Vance ran against maybe not an incumbent, but a very well-known candidate in Tim Ryan, and won that pretty comfortably, 4 to 5 points. And he's by far the most pro-life candidate we've ever had in the U.S. Senate. Every statewide office holder has had some part in the heartbeat bill, either defending it or voting for it in the legislature. So it's probably not accurate to say that Ohio that we are as far left on abortion as California as issue 1 was. But certainly there's issues like that we have a lot of work to do in the culture, in the state, to bring folks around to our point of view.
But certainly the change from Citizens for Community Values, which you were, to the Center for Christian Virtue, that gives some people pause. That why is a Center for Christian Virtue involved in state government?
Right, the same reason that anybody's involved in state government, same reason why the Trucking Association or the Ohio Chamber or Equality Ohio is involved, right? We represent a constituency of Ohio. We represent Christians in Ohio that hold a biblical perspective, a biblical worldview, that care about the future of our state. And our voice, our opinion matters just as much as anybody else's in this debate of ideas that we have at the State House. That's what this is all about. And working in the system that's been built, the greatest system in the world, to advance public policy that builds up human flourishing, protects human dignity, protects liberty, all these fundamental ideas.
But has gerrymandering given you a outsized voice?
The bottom line on the gerrymandering conversation, and this is one of these things, even I heard the governor's comment on all of this, is that the idea of taking politics out of the process of drawing political lines is really nonsensical, right? No matter what state you go to, whatever party's not in control is going to accuse the other side of gerrymandering, right? There is no such thing as having an impartial commission on doing these things, because there's nobody that doesn't have a point of view or perspective, right? This is what politics is. It's the process by which we decide what the rules and the laws are going to be. And so as we're looking at things like this, I think the worst case scenario you see in any of these ideas, whether it's judicial reform or redrawing lines or things like that, is when you take the power of that process out of the hands of people who are voted for in any way, right, it ends up in a really bad situation because now the politics are being taken away from the directly elected individuals to behind the closed doors with well-connected and powerful individuals. But it doesn't take the politics out of it, that's for sure, because you can't take the politics out of drawing political lines.
So I guess we know where you're going to fall on the redistricting amendment if it comes forward.
Exactly, yeah,
All right.
there's a breaking news one for you.
The claim that far more constitutional amendments are coming forward now than before the 60% voter threshold was rejected in August is not true. There are 2 proposed citizen initiative amendments in the signature gathering process now on minimum wage and redistricting. There's also a proposal to ban required vaccines that was certified for signature gathering in 2022. Amendments to repeal and guarantee certain voting laws and to end qualified immunity for police and government officials have been proposed but have yet to be approved by the Attorney General. In 2015, there were 2 amendments on the ballot from citizens or groups on redistricting, which passed, and recreational marijuana, which failed. In 2012, there were 8 talked about, including on redistricting, medical marijuana, dog auctions, and so-called personhood, but those never made the ballot. Only 1 did on a redistricting commission, and it failed. In 2005, there were 4 citizen-initiated amendments on campaign finance, early absentee voting, another to create a redistricting commission, and a commission to oversee elections. All of those failed. 51 citizens groups have tried to bring amendments to Ohio's ballot. Only 6 were successful, and 3 of those issues were rejected by voters. 2 of the 3 successful ones were backed by Republicans. And the majority of constitutional amendments that are both proposed and approved by voters come from state lawmakers.